All right. So my kids are Gen Zs. I have a 16-year-old son, a 14-year-old son, time of this recording, and Antonia and I have a 10-year-old daughter together at the time of this recording. All three of them are right in the middle of the Gen Z generation, and it's the archetypal energy of the artist. The last time we saw this was the silent generation, so it was the generation of Bob Dylan and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Jack Kerouac and, all the singers and writers and creators that were coming online in the 50s and 60s of the last century. Mm-hmm. This generation here is coming of age now. They're in their teen years, but they're also children. And there's big question marks about how they're going to show up to the world. But we have some generational archetypical energy that we assume. And I'd say it's probably pretty spot on. So the archetype is the artist. A lot of people call Gen Zs the YouTube generation. Mm-hmm. I mean, my kids go on to YouTube and they can teach themselves. They've taught themselves all sorts of stuff.
Everything. It's insane how much test iterating happens with this younger generation.
They're on TikTok. They're iterating off of other, creators. They're on YouTube. They're watching YouTubers build and create and make things, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about this. This looks like a lot of hope. And now this is a very Gen X viewpoint, right? I'm looking at my kids going, that's right.
Look at you figuring it out.
Right? I have hacker.
So competent.
Yeah.
We have a hacker ethos. We call our company personality hacker, like hacking things together, figuring it out, make it work, be creative, whatever it takes. That's exciting to me. And I can totally see that. So first of all, how does a millennial's viewpoint, again, you're not representing your entire generation. I know that, but what do you think the sense of, because I can tell you how my kids think about millennials.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can say it live on the air without a lot of editing.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I've got stepkids. I've got 10 and 7, and I've got a son that's on the West Coast. He's 5. Yeah. And they're young kids. They're playing Roblox. They're obsessed with customizing. They're in this space of, they're kind of connected to each other, but there's also this kind of winner take all sort of mentality. So it's the hardest to pull sort of experiential data from because they're still growing up. But if we follow some of the principles that we've been following so far in terms of boomers and millennials kind of triggering each other, I think Gen X and Gen Z are going to have kind of a similar notion. And I think with Gen Z, we've got more of this almost community or communism forefront. It's not necessarily by choice, just as the individualism for nomads, Gen X, weren't really by choice. It was just because you had to. Yeah. Right. So Gen Z is also community because they have to. They're in a time period of obedience and crisis. Do what I say, stay inside. You don't have to put on a mask, get a vaccine, do all the things, right? Do all the things you're quote unquote supposed to do. Follow this ideology. And you had this joke on the last podcast of or one of the previous podcasts of holding up a sign, you're a 7-year-old and, perpetuating your parents' ideology, right? The kids don't know, but they're doing it and they're performing it to an extreme for their own sense of safety and being taken care of and getting their needs met, right? So every generation doesn't really know what they're missing out on until they conquer or not conquer, but they come across other generations that are experiencing different things and that awaken something. Like in the silent generation, they watched World War II happen. They did not fully participate, but they were mostly watching the war occur. And they were in a very isolated, very overprotected time period. And so the 60s come along and you've got the baby boomers naked in the streets, running around and, free love and all of that stuff. And have really triggered the silent generation or many of them to just feel like, what do you mean you could be so free? And it actually started to awaken some of the freedom of plenty of the silent generation of individual expression and being able to go in that direction. So with that in mind too, it feels like watching these younger kids having this sort of forced community aspect. There's also this competition framework. You can almost call it community as the persona and competition as the shadow, or meritocracy as we refer to for the persona for Gen X. Mm-hmm. So it's like this perception that they very much trust each other. There's this, they can't do anything without each other. They love playing video games with each other. It's always this multiplayer community dynamic, and everyone's watching the same YouTube videos and learning a lot of the similar things. But there's, like you said, they're figuring out things on their own. There's a lot of individualism in there. There's a lot of winner take all sort of mindset in there that's happening as well. And I suspect when they get older, that will start to creep in much more.
Yeah, you used Fortnite's Battle Royale as when we were talking before, as a almost an example. Not that we haven't all done Battle Royales, and even in older generations of gamers, but there's this idea that they're all together, but they're actually trying to carve each other down until they get to the person who's at the top.
Yeah.
And the shadow will probably also have some hierarchical elements in it as well.
Get together and kill each other.
That's right. Get together and kill each other.
Yeah. Winner take all. And then there's also this obsession with customizing, like individuation, not individuation in the Jungian sense, but individualizing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
I need the cool hat. I need the skin. I need to, when my kids, I bought them a game, Splatoon. It's very similar to Fortnite, and like a shoot 'em up kind of game. And the first question is like, how do I get a new gun? How do I get the new clothes or skins, or how do I get that? And even then it's like, there's kind of an expectation that I should be able to get this pretty quickly. Like I can start to grind with the intention of getting the things that I want. Right. So it's kind of this question of, if I've spent all of this time being overprotected, there's this underbelly of what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And that kind of creeps in with being able to do that in video games, because you can't do it in life.
Yeah. So my daughter, 10-year-old daughter Piper, asked me to play Fortnite with her, and I loved it. At first I hated it, but now I love playing this. I don't know why, but I just really love playing Fortnite. We play teams, and we often win, so we do great.
They are so funny too. They are angry. Both of them freak out. I will hear them from the basement.
No,
freaking out that they did. I mean, it's
anyway,
actually kind of adorable.
But it's hard to get Piper to go play the game.
Right.
She wants to sit in the item shop, and she wants to pick out new emojis, like, or emotion. What are they? Emotes, I think they're called.
Yeah.
And I could be less interested. Why? What's the point? But it's that expression, the iterative expression, almost like a TikTok video. She loves to see the character dance or perform or express in something, and pick the different skins for her character.
Right.
And she's iterating and iterating and iterating. And that's more attractive to her often than actually going and actually playing the game, the challenge itself.
Right. And I think there's a distinction between how millennials were raised in playing video games. Super Mario Brothers, you start from the left, you work all the way to the right, you go save the princess. There's a goal. And I've noticed a lot of millennials will pick up a game, and they're like, what do I do? What's the goal? What am I supposed to do here? It's like that, and looking for an instruction manual kind of thing again. But Gen Z is just like, all right, poke around. Like, how do I get what I want? It's like, how do I get what I want is the initial question. And it's funny to me, again, watching Splatoon, and he's like, my instinct is like, there's a linear progression. Play the game, do the thing, and then you'll get stuff as a consequence of playing the game. But there's this idea of I was watching him trying to do that, and he was really struggling, because I just can tell he's just so distracted by I want to get what I want. I want to figure out the bare minimum of what I need to get the things that I want. And I was sitting on the couch and watching him, and I'm like, this is my nightmare. I'm just like watching him not figure it out. Like the same thing with the Gen X in a way, but it was like not going towards the goal, not doing the thing you needed to do, not making it happen.
I remember my 16-year-old stepson. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we were effectively talking about chores and some other things that had to be done. And he said the phrase, "That would be a waste of my time." And he was like 15. I'm like, what are you talking about? You have infinite time. Like, you have nothing but time. You don't do anything. Like, you just sit around, play video games, and every once in a while have chores in school. So that idea of like, what's in it for me? Yeah. That the idea that his time could be wasted, you know, by an older person requesting something of him. It's like, it was almost a surprising, it was like a paradigm shift. Of like, this is how this kid sees the world, right, in terms of my time. Right.
And it's really interesting to watch these generations play out, in that there are distinct differences, or at least we feel there are. We're all parents, we see that. And just that comparison with video games, I spent most of my time playing video games. Like, it's just a very different perspective. I play a lot of games that are like completionist. Collect all the things, go do the stuff. And my daughter even asked the question. She gets like points, like you can see that being applied in the school system now, that there's like points for behavior, there's points for whatever you're doing in school and learning and stuff. And my daughter asked, like, I don't know what these points are for. Can I use them for something? Right. And so that's an interesting question. It's like this idea of like,
Yeah.
what's in it for me is, I think it's a very valid question with what they're contending with. And it's just an interesting finality to these dichotomies that we're experiencing.
Yeah. And I also, as an Xer, look at the younger generation, my kids. And there's a sense of pride in that they're figuring it out for sure. And so do you think that I guess this is just you won't have an answer necessarily, but I'd love to hear your opinion.
Sure.
If there's going to be as much trigger between two recessive generations as there are in two dominant generations.
I don't think there would be as much.
And for reference, for anybody who's new to generational theory, prophets and heroes right now, baby boomers and millennials, they're considered dominant generations. And Gen Xers, which are nomads, and Gen Z, or the YouTube generation or whatever you want to call them, they're artists, they're recessive generations. And so as a general rule, recessive generations, they're not smaller necessarily in size, they're just quieter in influence or impact.
Yeah. I think the triggering is going to depend on your exposure over time, because right now we know it's our kids. Like we know a lot of nuance of what they're experiencing, and we see both sides of it. We see the connective part and the shadow part. But when we're starting to learn Gen Z at large, I mean, I even see myself getting a little bit triggered by the learned helplessness at times, like in the collective presentation. Like we've had at our art studio, we had a couple of interns. We hired one intern, and she would bother our creative director constantly. Just no sense of personal initiative. At least that was the perception, right? And it's this idea of like no initiative unless there's something in it for me, right? And like what's the most thing, like the least incentivized thing you could do is be an intern. Like you don't get anything in return, seemingly. Like you don't literally physically get anything, or dollars or anything like that. You're just showing up, you're learning, you're getting experience. And there was no initiative. But the second that we hired 2 or 3 interns at a time, they were able to work together, and they were kind of working with each other and kind of competing with each other for these intangibles versus, needing more incentive individually. So it's just kind of an interesting difference in incentive if they're collective versus individual. And it's still kind of all those things at play.